I'm Beverley Nielsen, and I'm here today with Rowan Crozier, Chief Executive of C. Brandauer & Co. Limited. We're in Newtown, adjacent to the renowned jewellery quarter in Birmingham, and it's a great pleasure to be here today at Brandauer. Rowan, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the amazing origins of your business.
Yes, of course. Brandauer were founded 153 years ago, 1862. Two families, the Brandauers and the Pettits, got their heads together and decided to set up a factory here in Birmingham manufacturing pen nibs.
And did they make a really big range, or?
Initially, no. They made quite a small range of products, launched to the market quite gradually, but were very successful and fairly quickly established themselves as being one of the number one in the world for the provision of dipping ink pen nibs.
Well, you've got a very distinguished history, I know that, and I've seen from some of the archive in your reception that you exhibited at the Great Exhibition, for example. Can you just talk us through some of the early years and how the company developed, and what were the real specialisations that the company developed in those early years?
The company actually didn't specialise beyond pen nibs until the Great Wars. So the First World War drove them to supply munition clips, and then they re-established themselves as a pen nib supplier after the First World War, and then along came the Second World War, and they were making components for brake systems for aerospace applications for planes flying in the Second World War. And then they went back to supplying pen nibs after the war's finished.
Yes, and then in the 60s the world changed with the advent of the electronics industry, I think. And what were your specialist skills that enabled you to diversify again at that point?
Well, the company always did, and still does indeed, manipulate and cut very thin non-ferrous metal components. That's what pen nibs effectively are. And what they found they could do quite, not quite well, very well, was actually reinvent themselves to supply components very quickly. So it meant they could diversify. As you rightfully said, the electronics industry drove to us to explore those opportunities there. And indeed, one of the first things that we diversified into in the 60s was components for analogue record players.
Right. And then talk us through where you are today then, and tell us a little bit about what the business looks like today, what kind of size you are, how many do you employ?
The business is completely different today than it was 153 years ago. Number one, we don't make any pen nibs anymore. We now supply into 9 different market sectors, but essentially doing the same thing as we did 153 years ago, which is cutting and manipulating thin, very thin, non-ferrous metal components. We are supplying everything from components for the Large Hadron Collider right through to kettle control, contacts for your domestic kettles, plumbing fittings, and other electronic interconnects that you see in everyday life.
Well, obviously the Hadron Collider is a very specialist, sophisticated piece of equipment, if one can call it that, but kettle controls don't sound that sophisticated.
Our product now is all about manufacturing high volume with maximum automation, therefore minimum labour content in the work that we actually do. So we design tooling, processes and develop those to enable a very low element of labour content to it. That means providing 4 to 5 million parts per week to the kettle industry, which is 100% China based because they have to assemble in China.
Right.
But they are exported from here in Birmingham directly to China. How do we do that? It's through high-end, tightly toleranced progression tooling that we manufacture in-house.
Yes.
And then process development, which we do in-house, that enables high-volume, repeatable, tightly toleranced manufacture.
Right.
For then onwards to supply to our customers.
And how many people are you employing here in this business then?
We employ currently 55 people.
All right.
Average age of those are currently 45.
Right.
We're actually targeting an average age of about 42. So we've been actively recruiting new people, developing new people to attack the current skills gap problem that we're seeing in the nation at the moment.
So, talking about the challenges then for your particular business in advanced manufacturing, you're in the engineering part of advanced manufacturing. What do you see as the particular challenges for your sector, if I can call it that?
I think it's meeting the skill challenges that we face in the business. The majority of my top toolmakers here at Brandauer, the top technical engineers that I have here, have been through a circa 5 to 6 year apprentice program, and then beyond that they've got an additional 15 years worth of experience. I think as a nation we perhaps forgot to invest in our engineering and skills for a significant period of time, and the biggest challenge now is to catch up that gap that we have as a nation created. For us, we're attacking at that issue in a multitude of areas. So we're bringing new graduates into the business, we're doubling the number of apprentice intakes that we're taking, we're developing a mentor, both technical and pastoral mentor scheme here at Brandauer. We are upskilling some of the people we've got and to enable them to reach a higher potential. And all of those things are a solution. It's not just one thing that will solve the skills gap problem.
No. Do you think that now that the government has got an industrial strategy, that the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills in particular is really focused on the opportunities in advanced manufacturing and engineering? Do you think that's the case?
I think they've started to,
Right.
and we need a lot more of what's just been started. I would quote the Business is Great campaign as a real good thing to do, but I would be wanting that to be more slanted towards engineering, and have a real focus on engineering and manufacturing. We need to promote that industry as a great place to work in, encourage our young people from a very young age, primary school age preferably for me, to make that move and make that step into manufacturing, whether that's in an apprenticeship or coming out as as a graduate, or converting from other areas into manufacturing engineering. We have to promote that as a positive career course for all young people.
We conducted some research at Birmingham City University recently, working with the Midlands Economic Forum, and it indicated actually that manufacturing was contributing more like 38% of GVA here in the Midlands, rather than 14%, which the ONS figures, the Office of National Statistic figures, suggest. If that's the case, of course, it's a real about turn in the way we would think about our economy. In fact, manufacturing is driving the economy, is driving growth. We've seen recently in Birmingham that growth in 2013 was 2.5% GVA growth, as opposed to 1.6% for the economy as a whole. So do you see that in your business, that manufacturing is growing, and that in all aspects of engineering, we in Britain, and especially here in the Midlands, can be in the vanguard?
Absolutely. I think the key to our economic recovery in its fullest level is about us making things. If we make things, and we make things not just here in Birmingham but across the country, that will naturally lead to a stronger economic recovery. One of the things that's really affecting that happening at the moment is the uncertainty, and we're all thinking a little bit harder about when to spend our money and how to spend our money, and that trickles all the way up the supply chain, and we really need to be very positive about the fact that we can make things competitively here in the UK, and we can make things to a higher quality competitively here in the UK.
Just talk a little bit about that uncertainty. Is that uncertainty around the election? Is it uncertainty about Europe? What uncertainty?
I think it's uncertainty about anything that there's an excuse to be uncertain about, if I'm honest. So at the moment, yes, it's the election. It's uncertainty about the euro at the moment. It's uncertainty about whether Greece are in the euro or not in the euro. Anything that could cause some concern, that affects the consumer spending money, which we're all more aware of since the recession in 2008, 2009, I'm afraid that affects all the way through.
Yes.
You know, if the consumers are thinking about how to spend and when to spend their money, that means the whole supply chain does the same thing.
Well, you've mentioned the supply chain a couple of times in your thoughts here. Can you? It's quite a complex idea, isn't it? That, you know, we've got many tiers in the supply chain. Obviously, we have some really big original equipment manufacturers in the Midlands, and they look to buy off a whole group of companies. You've just given me some examples. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works and how it's increasingly important for these original equipment manufacturers to have very developed supply chains on their doorsteps?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a good example that everyone can relate to here in the Midlands is Jaguar Land Rover. So they're being heavily invested in by their new owners, and they are being very successful at making premium quality vehicles here in the Midlands. I suppose traditionally, to take cost out of the supply chain, a lot of the purchasing decisions were made to buy offshore, so to buy from Asia, in low-cost countries. What has been the case is that low cost is saving money, but it's not being compared like for like. By the time you've got the cost of poor quality, which we often see and associate with low-cost countries, and then perhaps a more significant cost is shipping product, particularly large system type components, whether it's parking brake levers or door release levers that go onto your Jaguar or your Land Rover, back from China or India or wherever that may be. The landed cost here in the UK becomes very high. So what that has driven actually is some local decisions to get tier one suppliers. So these are the guys that are assembling the systems, whether it's your door modules, your seats, your parking brake systems, whatever that might be, they're building those locally. So there's an element of local content, which means it's local to the plant. So all of the costs of managing quality and managing a delivery and packaging become lower, which means you can spend a little bit more money on sourcing the products in different regions. That's how the supply chain, I think, is beginning to evolve and develop for Jaguar Land Rover, for example. And
I think also that the large manufacturers like the Jaguar Land Rovers, the original equipment producers, are also collaborating much more with the supply chain than in the past in order to produce the sustainable, renewable developments for the future. Is that something you're seeing in where you fit into the supply chain?
Definitely. Collaboration is fundamental to our success, and I think it's fundamental to the success of advanced manufacturing going forward. Again, you mentioned Jaguar Land Rover. We are currently on the Automotive Council, which is a strong collaboration for the UK supply chain to support the development and the growth of Jaguar Land Rover in the region. That's a very collaborative effort that's being driven by BIS, that's being driven by the region, that's being driven by Jaguar Land Rover, and it's being rolled out to a lot of the other UK OEMs. McLaren, Morgan, big names like that actually are manufacturing, building cars here in the UK.
Do you think we would benefit from greater mapping of what competencies we have within our supply chain and greater understanding of that in order to onshore further business for the future?
I absolutely think we don't understand what capabilities we've got here as a nation at the moment, and also what we need to have here going forward. So yes, that level of mapping is vital, and it's beginning to happen, but we need to do a lot more of it.
One of the interesting aspects to collaboration that you mentioned in discussion earlier was joint marketing, collaboratively coming together with other manufacturers to promote your services across new sectors and to new customers. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've been working with other manufacturers to do that?
Yes, of course. So Brandauer turnover around £8 million a year in component sales and tooling sales. About 10 to 15% of that we've actually won through our collaborative network.
Really?
So we set up, along with 5 other founder members, a collaborative manufacturers network called Midlands Assembly Network, or MAN Group. That was set up around the time of the recession in 08-09, and we now have grown that to 10 members. Basically what it is 10 complementary, non-competing electromechanical manufacturers that work together to share best practice, and perhaps more importantly for the members in the group, win business. So we exhibit together, we have our own business development manager that represents all 10 members, and we go out there, we set a strategy each year, we have a rotating chair that leads the 10 businesses, and we meet once a month to share best practice. That, for us, has delivered more than £1 million worth of new business that we currently have on our books.
Yes.
Collaboration really works for Brandauer, and I think there's, of the 10 members, all of us truly believe there's an awful lot more to exploit from that. UK manufacturing is very much alive and kicking. There's a huge amount of capability contained within just that collaboration, and I think it's unique. I've not heard of anything else that's as powerful as that and as successful as that can promote those sort of numbers.
I mean, I think it's a phenomenal case study, actually, and I think what you've said so far then is we need much greater collaboration within supply chains.
Yes.
And understanding our capabilities and competencies within supply chains. We need much greater collaboration across supply chains.
Yes.
And then I think there's the collaboration through the skills supply chain. So you've talked about the importance of apprenticeships a little bit. I know that you're collaborating with Birmingham City University on a knowledge transfer partnership. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see that being developed by companies like your own? What should more businesses be doing?
It's very interesting. We came across this, dare I say it, by accident, really, in terms of collaborating more closely with universities. We've always tried to upskill our people. So, our apprentices that come through the business that want to move on to the next step, we are more than happy as a business to support them through a part-time degree. We've done that with 3 of our apprentices in the last 5 years. 2 of them still work here at Brandauer, and we've done both of them through BCU. So they've gone on from being an apprentice to do their further education to graduate in a manufacturing orientated degree. That obviously helps the individual, and it very much helps the company. As part of that, as part of the sort of closeout meeting with BCU, we began to explore what else we could do with the university, and that's when we discovered knowledge transfer partnerships, KTPs. And I dreamt up a project that actually takes what we do today in terms of our tool, which is as the material that the tool is made of, and how could we make that better, extend the run lengths, improve the efficiency of what we do and how we do it, come up with new grades of material that perhaps would allow us to stamp materials that are not stampable because they're so hard. All of that, really, cutting a long story short, came to a KTP proposal for a 3-year project with BCU that enables us to take forward and innovate the materials that sit within inside some of the tools that we make. That's, I'm very happy to say, was launched last November. So we're sort of very early days of a 3-year KTP. That continues to evolve, that relationship and other things we can do with BCU. So we're currently considering a PhD, which is a slightly different angle. We're perhaps considering, it's all top secret stuff, but we're currently considering actually developing our own product, a Brandauer labelled product. The initial stages of that, we've had some grant funding to explore. Both BCU and Brandauer are happy enough that we've got what we need to take it to the next stage, which is, again, it's a 3-year PhD project, the output of which might be a working prototype of a Brandauer product, which is quite exciting. So collaboration with universities continues. it is a fundamental part of enabling us not only to deal with this skills problem that we've got, but for me it's a support, it's a way of innovating and continuing to innovate and reinvent what we do, diversify and consider alternative angles and sales channels from the ones we currently have today.
So, and looking to the future then, and just thinking about what the future might hold for a company like your own, you say you're about 8 million turnover, if I remember correctly, at the moment. How, over the next 5 to 10 years, what do you see, where would you see Brandauer as a business?
I've since September when I was appointed as CEO, I've set a very top level plan. I think we can double the size of the business over the next 5 to 10 years.
Really?
Yeah, we have the capacity to do that, assuming we can put all of the products through our current processes, which we currently have in place here. We currently have the people, the capability. We now are engaged with the universities. I can see us making inroads into the skills gap. It's very much a doable thing. We've just launched, which is really quite exciting, a special products division, which enables us to not only offer a solution to the high volume marketplace, but we can actually offer a solution to the prototyping and low volume, the 1 to 20,000 per annum arena. And that naturally feeds into the high volume press shop and tool room that I've already got well established here at Brandauer. So I think it's very much a doable thing for us to double the size of this business over the next 5 to 10 years.
And you can compete in the volume business and in the specialist business. And when people say that, you know, manufacturing in the UK is not as productive, our productivity isn't up with the best in the world, what would you say to that?
Not true. Absolutely. I think we've all got to work harder to maintain our efficiency and our productivity. But if you buy into a culture of continuous improvement, and if you buy into a culture of improved efficiencies, you can be done. That's one thing the recession has made us. That's a company that's much more thoughtful and careful about where they invest their money, and much more efficient as a result of doing that.
And if there was one policy ask or one thing that could be done to help businesses like yours all over the Midlands, what would that be?
Raise the profile of engineering as a career, as a viable career, and also promote the fact that we make and innovate as one of the best in the world in the UK. If we can promote that message, we will get an awful lot further, an awful lot quicker.
Well, that seems a very good place to conclude this discussion. Thank you very much, Rowan Crozier. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Beverley.